No, we're delighted to be with you. I'm Marcus Ray, and we'll do a little further introductions. But this course, I want to tell you folks, is newly developed using the core framework from NACOM. And it is part of that champion program. I was wondering, for a show of hands, how many of you are actually pursuing those certificates for champion? So maybe about 30% of us, right? We can step that up, and Dawn has all the details about how that works. But I really would encourage you. I think it's just a terrific way to kind of further develop your kind of professionalism in the field here. I say this is new material because we've tried to put a fresh twist on this. And so we would genuinely like to get your feedback during the course of the meeting and afterwards as well. Ray, I don't know if you want to just share maybe a little more about what we're going to cover in the program here today.
Yeah, there's a couple slides, and you need to know a couple things about Marcus and I. We really don't follow that thing. It's just there. So really don't read too tied to it. But we really want to focus with you today on helping you as court managers, you as court leaders, in transitioning into new leadership within your organization. And we're going to talk a little bit, Marcus is going to talk about it, I'm going to talk a little bit about first identifying what are those pitfalls and what are those issues that you need to look out for when you have a transition into a new leadership. We're going to talk a little bit about those things that are unique to our environment. And we all know our court environments are unique, are they not? And things that you need to be on the lookout for. We're going to talk about leveraging that organizational change, and we're also going to talk with you and work through what we believe are some of the key strategies to success from when you have a transition in leadership. Not just for you as the court manager or the court leader, but for the organization as well. So we're going to get into some of those strategies going forward. But before we get there, so how many of you have recently gone through an organizational change? Leadership. One word. What was it like?
Exciting.
Exciting? Did you have your...
Transitional.
Transitional?
Difficult.
Difficult. Others? Who wants to just throw them out there? I'm repeating it. I'm sorry?
A nightmare.
A nightmare. All right, let me see a show of hands. How many agree with nightmare?
This is my new boss.
Oh. He's just said. Okay. Good for you, though. Hey, good for you. Well, that's right. Yours was positive. Yeah, positive. Okay. And that's the point here. There's positive, and there's some concerns about leadership transitions. And as we know, for us as court leadership, that can be a difficult time, can it? Very difficult time, because you're not sure what's expected of me tomorrow when that leadership changes. What's the organization going to look like? Is it going to change? How are we going to react to that? And I'm sure many of us asked those questions. And I'm sure some of you in this room have probably asked yourself, maybe it's time for me to dust off my resume and look for else, because I don't know where. See, he's laughing. That's the truth. And so today, what we want to do in this session is really help you get the tools and the ideas and the thoughts necessary to help you and your new leader and your organization transition successfully. Now, two quick things about Marcus and I. We do not sit still. We will move around because we are older and we have to keep the circulation moving to our legs. That's the first one, so we'll be up and down. But second, this is interactive, as you can already see. This isn't about two guys giving you a law school lecture. This is about us learning together. We've got a lot of years of experience in this area. We're going to share with you what we know, but that doesn't mean we know it all. And we're going to ask you to help us build that list of the keys to success in transitions. So with that, do we deal? Everybody agree with that? And if I don't get a lot of response and I walk through and I see you looking down, I'm calling on you. Just a tip. So anyway, so I'll turn it back over to Marcus and
no, thanks, Ray. And so that's fair warning. Everybody's engaged, right? I should pull some of you back seats up in front here as well. But what we're talking about is passing the torch. And did any of you ever watch some of these relay races? It's really pretty incredible. And what are they doing there? They're making sure that they pass that baton, right? I see Rick here, our coach, right? but they don't want to lose pace, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about organizationally, okay? These transitions can be really disruptive, and I can share some war stories with you, but sometimes when they go smoothly, we're suggesting it's not just business as usual. You can actually leverage that. You can use that energy, right, to kind of take the organization up a notch. And so that's kind of the argument we're going to pitch to you, and hopefully calm our nerves as we kind of make that transition. I was going to share one more story. Is that okay with folks? Okay, so early in my career, I'm about 28 years old, in a 19-judge court, and they would rotate every 2 years, the presiding judge. And the first two were known. Everybody was aware of these folks. They had done a lot of bench bar committees and leadership activities, and they were just terrific. The third judge, not so much, okay? Kind of a recluse, really never came to the bench meetings, for example, and I guess it was by seniority that he came into this job, but nobody really had a sense about this judge. We heard he had a big military background, okay, but really didn't care much about administration and so on. And the staff were really fretting, okay? Almost every day people, if you talk to him, what do you think? What's this going to be like? And it really hit me. One of the law clerks said, I was wanting to buy a house, but now we're talking about maybe we should wait. We don't want to have a mortgage if we're going to all get fired, right? And I thought, man, you guys are kind of overdoing this a little bit, right? But I was getting nervous myself. And so one morning at breakfast, my wife, Anita, some of you have met, she says, you're in the newspaper today. Really? And she goes, no, it's good, okay? So she reads this article, and it kind of talks about the military background of this new judge. And finally it says, I don't know much about administration, okay? I'll be depending on my court administrator, Marcus, to run the court. I thought, wow, okay, so what a relief, you know, and all that fretting we had done. But that's what kind of piqued my interest with this topic as I was talking with Ray. I could have reached out to that guy. I could have done some briefings, and we could have met, right? Didn't do it. And, you know, sort of that fear of the unknown. So I learned a lot from that. And we'll kind of share some other things that are a little more formal when it comes to using your strategic plan, that type of thing. So we wanted to ask you, maybe anybody else been through something like that you can share? This is, we're not in Las Vegas, but just anything else where it was maybe kind of really troubling for you folks? Or challenging, let me put it that way.
Who's had a challenging experience with a transition they want to share with us? Please. Hold on.
Dawn is fast, but she's not that fast.
We are being live streamed, so we've been given strict instructions, which Marcus and I usually ignore, but we've got to get you the microphone and speak.
A couple of things. One was the transition wasn't really communicated very well to everyone, so there was not a lot of buy-in. And that caused a lot of challenges from the top down and from the bottom up.
Was there anything you could share that helped you to kind of make through, or?
Not at this time.
So she just hit on a good point, though. Communications plan, and we'll talk about it as we go forward. Some of you may have jumped ahead and saw the presentation in the notes, but we'll talk about that.
Communication is really key. I compared some of the changes in judicial leadership to enforced speed dating. Oh. You're not quite sure what you're getting, and all of a sudden you're married.
That's right.
It's like, goodness, where are we going now?
Yep. That's well said. Anybody else? We've got one. Janet's here. Janet, I know most of your judges, so I don't want to get in trouble here now, okay?
The good thing is they're retired now. I'm losing my voice. I had a new presiding judge took over. We were fairly proud of our case flow management policy. He ripped it up the first week.
Oh, my.
That happens, doesn't it?
All right. Thanks for sharing, folks. I think it makes us sort of come alive, and there are probably many other examples. And I like to kid with you, but sometimes it really is a big deal, and it can be life-changing in some cases. So what we want to do is kind of talk about, this is not unique to courts, but there are some dynamics in the court that I think are kind of a little different than the private sector. So we want to walk through that. And I love this graphic here where you have these elite climbers, right? And you think about it, and they will do the training we think about, but they have all their equipment and sometimes backup equipment, and they're looking at every vulnerability, right, before they make that trek. And that's kind of what we're hoping when we leave here. Maybe we sharpen our tools and we kind of have a a more complete picture. So there's not much research on this in the court manager. Sorry, folks, okay? I know NACOM's done a lot on management, but as a whole, transitions, I've found most of the research is actually private sector, and this work here is, I think, fascinating, where they did some survey work and also some qualitative interviews and found that if you do have a smooth transition, if it goes well, okay, that first 3 years, your team is going to hit most of the goals you laid out, right? You're going to have really high return on that staffing there. And the other part I really like about this study, you're going to see lower recidivism. Anybody having trouble hiring staff since the pandemic? What's this? I quit generation, right? It's incredible. And so that's an enormous kind of a gain there. And they showed really significant improvement. Where you don't have that kind of a transition, where it's disruptive and where you have that stress, you're going to have folks that are not engaged, right? And just a lower return on your projects and your plans and whatnot. And I kept thinking about for courts, the work we're doing, our projects, they're just critical, right? When you think about public access and case management and new jury systems, and we need to be on that left side of that chart, I think. And so that study, I think, was telling. Now, this one, I wanted to ask you about it. They're saying in the private sector, up to 46% of these transitions do not go well. That feels exaggerated to me. I don't think that's been my experience in my career, but that was their sense about it. I have seen that in some of the large code agencies, some of the big state agencies under the governor. I think that probably, in my experience, approaches that kind of a return. And then likewise with some not-profits. If you've seen, they just go through executive directors with some of these programs. And so, but what's your sense? Do you think, are we really at 46%, or is it more? Anybody want to venture a guess? Mark, you've been around for a long time, so. You're still here, okay? So, no, I don't know if I have a number, but that's, I think it's just instructive that we're not alone when you see these kind of challenges. And then likewise, this survey work actually talked about the importance of court culture. And I think most of you have seen the high performance court framework. I know Ken was talking this morning about the work from Brian Ostrom, right? When it comes to court culture. And these managers, when they interviewed them later, said, I should have done more. I should have been more mindful right up front in the first few months of the politics inside the organization, the court culture. So sort of those realities. You can have the best laid plans on paper. And some of you I know have really sophisticated strategic planning documents, right? But is the court ready for that? Is the court really on board? Are those plans in alignment, let's say, with some of the other agencies and with the Supreme Court? So I thought that was really telling on maybe how best to spend our time here. And then courts, I wanted to mention, I do think we're a little bit different animal. And the main thing is that these presiding judges don't always leave the court when they're finished, do they? Most chief executive officers in the private sector, they leave. They're off to other ventures, and sometimes the whole team will change as well. You have a presiding judge that stays another 6 or 8 years, and it's kind of like a ghost in the courthouse, right? And my experience, typically they're supportive, but I've had some where not so much. And we had one presiding judge that would actually stop down on the fourth floor of Central Court 2 or 3 times a week. And I could tell when he was upset because he actually came directly from the parking ramp, briefcase in hand, okay, to let us know about his concerns with the new presiding judge. Why is that judge doing this or that? And we finally had to say, you're really putting us in a bad spot, okay? Because that judge is right down the hall. And so those kind of politics can be kind of tough, I think. And then I am concerned about the quick rotation on some of these judges. Some of them are as short as 1 year. I saw one study, I think it was 2.7 years. And then I know when I worked with the courts in Cook County, Chicago, I think it was 13 years, like a dynasty, right? But typically that rotation is not really conducive to your long-range planning and sort of continuity in planning as well. And when you have these plans, oftentimes they're not up to date, okay? And so the court may not be really clear. What are we really working on here? What are the priorities of this operation? And so Ray will be talking to you about some ways to kind of sharpen that up, okay? And you can use that to your advantage.
Let me throw one more in here too. So let me ask you, many of you have gone through transitions from one presiding to the next. Mm-hmm. Was it ever a problem with the new presiding judge, the relationship you had with the previous one? Was it ever an issue?
Yes.
Answer that question. Yes. And the reason I ask is, and I assume some of you, maybe that new presiding judge said, whoa, You know, how do I get to that relationship? And I need that on the same day, or you guys were too close. We need to. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? How did you deal with it? I saw some heads. I see you smiling over there. How did you deal with it? I like that.
That's good. No, hey.
It took time, I think,
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think it just took time to build the relationship with the new incoming chief judge and build trust, because there was a lack of trust there, because that chief judge coming in assumed that people in a way were too loyal to the outgoing judge and could not build trust with him or her. And it just took time to make them understand that our role is different. We're here to do a job for the whole court and not just the chief judge or the other judges. Our job and service is to the whole court and the public.
Thank you. Oftentimes, the new presiding judge and the existing one may not be very friendly with each other, may not be allies, may not be on the same page. And they walk in seeing you as aligned with this person. Right. So thus a pitfall, a risk that you have to be aware of and understand how to deal with it, because it's real. It can be real because it's human emotion, and it may address or may affect your ability to transition smoothly. Sorry.
And that's in real time, what you talked about, right? Yeah. And that dimension of time where you can't slow that down, but it's going to take a little
Anyone
bit.
else want to share along those lines? Their own personal? Yes?
Yeah, please. We've got a mic right for you coming from behind. Yeah, thank you.
I think sometimes that can cause biases also.
Okay.
Because you have that great relationship with that judge. So the incoming judge is never going to be good to you as that outgoing judge if you had a great relationship with that outgoing judge. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter what that new judge do. Maybe you're going to feel like, because we're human beings. Right. So maybe you're going to feel like, oh, he's not doing this good. He's not doing that good, because of the way how that outgoing judge used to do. So
thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? And I would just footnote that too, Ray, you really do become close with these folks when you work together. I always thought I spent more time with the presiding judge than my wife, family, and it's just crazy. And so after 3 or 4 years or longer, you're gonna, and you'll be perceived that way, that, man, these guys are always together and they're always in meetings, and you want that executive component, right, or the productive pairs. We work so hard to put that together, but then you're right, the new judges come in and maybe kind of questioning loyalties and maybe some of the direction. Was there another hand back here? Okay. So with that, I think Ray's going to kind of share with you now. We've kind of talked about some of the vulnerabilities and some of these risks, right? And my conclusion is it's very real, right? So now we're going to try to kind of look forward and see maybe how can we kind of
Thank you.
Use planning to our advantage.
But before, we've talked about the risks, some of the risks, we've identified some of them. You have many more in your mind, but before we jump into some of our suggested key points for successful transition, I want to make sure you fully realize the tools in your toolbox. We hope that you have, because you're going to need them. You're going to need to use them as this transition goes forward. And as I said, generally, and again, I'm assuming we're talking about transition with the court lead, the court manager, the court administrator has been there for some time. You're there with a comprehensive knowledge of the organization. Many times, new presiding judges don't have that. They're going to rely on you or what they hear from other judges about really how this organization operates. You have built, hopefully, in your time with that organization, sound relationships, not only internal to your organization, but external as well. because the leadership judge, that leadership person is going to need that kind of, that kind of experience with them. You can demonstrate you've had a track record of success. Now, I'm not saying to you, by the way, before I get into this, we're going to talk about these in both short-term and long-term, because some of these things, and I'll talk about a little bit later, you don't want to do on day one. But there are things you do want to do on day one, and starting to build, and I'll get into the next slide, build some of those. But these take, these can be at any point in the relationship and building it. Take time to know that new presiding judge, that new chief judge, who he or she is. What's their background? Where are their pressure points? How do they relate to other stakeholders? Because sometimes you have a new presiding judge came in that was a former prosecutor who doesn't like the current prosecutor, whatever it may be. And so there may be tension in those areas. So it is incumbent upon we in those positions to really understand what their demands are that we put on them. And always, we've talked about this a little bit, and I'm a big, I know my team here is going to start cringing. I'm a big productive pair person. I totally believe the work of managing and organizing and running courts is not a one-person job. It is a two-person job, at least. That is the judicial head and the administrative executive head. And I always talk about that because, and I believe it, that relationship is vital to successfully running the organization, and it's vital to transitions. Because we do come from separate bodies of expertise, do we not? And we are all professionals and experts. I'm not saying you walk in day one and tell that new judge, this is what I know and I know what we should do. Of course not. But remember, you have that in your toolkit as something you can rely on when you're beginning the transitions. I approach the transition key points from two perspectives. One, that is me as a court leader to you as the new leadership judge, and then from an organizational perspective. And what are the key components of moving forward and making it successful? No doubt, and I don't think anybody will doubt this, that building trust and rapport is on the top of the list. When you have a trusting relationship with that new leadership judge, makes a lot of things easier, doesn't it? How have you gone about, share with us how you've gone about building that. I've identified some things here, like being reliable, being accountable. What about other things? What other things have you done to help facilitate that trust and rapport between you and the new leader, the new presiding judge? Yes,
yeah, Rick.
Establishing communication right off.
Yeah, come on in. I thought I did.
Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah. And he's the president of the organization.
You have it up there on the slide. Just constant and consistent communication, from the start.
It is difficult. But it is the key. It is the key. Now, don't flood them. You can't make it so they don't want to talk to you anymore, because all you do is give them more and more information. You've got to understand where they're at in their transition, but communicating is at the top of the list. Did you have your hand up, ma'am? No, I'm sorry. Understand and support them and align yourself with their vision forward and their key points and their goals. Now, I'm not saying you abandon everything you've done in your career and stop and turn around and do something different. No, that's not what I'm saying. But you can find room. You have to find room in your ability to modify yourself and align so that there is clear consistency between what that new PJ is doing and saying and what you're doing and saying. And again, my folks will laugh, but my current PJ and I always say it, there's no light between us. What he says, I would say in another room. What I say, he would say in another room about the organization. I'm not talking about specific legal matters. And so what does that do for an organization? If your administrator and your presiding judge are on the same page, how do you feel? Mm-hmm. Please, anybody. Please, thank you. Yeah, we're coming. I could give you this.
I think that provides consistency to the staff. That means that everybody's on the same page. Things are consistent. They don't have to feel like they're caught in the middle of a, kind of a ping pong table.
We're going to talk about the impacts of the organization. That's exactly what they feel through a transition.
Yeah,
she
right
had a comment.
Over here
yes.
too. Yeah.
Over here.
Oh, just when they operate as a unified team, that it doesn't matter which one you're talking to and that they're aligned in their thinking.
Anyone else? Let's go the other way. How many of you experienced just the opposite, when there was not alignment at the top and there was a clear division between what the leadership judge wanted to do or was doing and what the leadership administrator was doing? Anybody experienced that? None? Yes, please, Judge. Oh, we got a judge.
Oh, no, I'm not a judge. I'm not a judge. No,
Oh.
no. The thing that I've experienced is when they've had that being on different pages is there's this political battle that occurs kind of within the organization, and that forces the staff to kind of split allegiances, and whomever they're in front of in the moment is the one they have to, listen to and follow, and so that forced dichotomy works its way through the entire organization and kind of corrupts itself, from the inside out. Becomes a terrible place to live, work, be. You don't want to be
place
there.
to be.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to share their experience with any situation like that? Whoops. Can I move this since we're mobile?
Yeah.
Marcus, how many transitions have you been through?
Boy, if I were to think about it, I think 7 presiding judges. This is like right here, you all see. And I think 6 chief justices over the years. So it is kind of interesting. And I know, Ray, we talked earlier, and we're focused on these presiding judges, but I think you have the same dynamics. I want to ask you all, with the new chief probation officer, with the new CIO, they are like solid gold, right? But those are really big appointments, and maybe even with some of your department presiding judges in the larger courts. So, and I guess I'm working at the Supreme Court now, and boy, that's a big deal to have a shift in the Chief Justice or the Associate Chief Justice. So we want to think more broadly, because I think everything Ray is laying out here, I think it will apply, and it may have some kind of different nuances, but our staff, a lot of them may not work directly with that chief judge, but they maybe do work with that probation chief or the CIO, for example.
So I've been through 9. Hopefully, I'll get 10, but we'll see. How many, anybody more than that in this room? Some of you may work for 2.
You have to be in a court that rotates every 2 years, okay? You can really rank.
Mark, how many? Oh, yeah, that's right. You are old. I forgot. 13. So Mark Weinberg from Daytona Beach is the winner in the clubhouse. He's at 13 transitions.
And Mark, what's that rotation like? What's the timing on?
Every 2 years.
Okay.
You do successive terms, so sometimes they start 4 years.
Okay. So, yeah, just for the folks out there. Yeah. Go ahead, Mark, if you don't mind. Yeah, sorry.
They serve 2-year terms.
Okay.
They can do successive terms. So the max is 8.
Okay.
8 years.
8 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Some leave sooner.
And I'm sure, like Marcus and many of you, I've had pretty good transitions, had not so good transitions. And alignment has probably been one of the biggest issues I had with adjusting to a new presiding judge, where I wasn't sure if I could follow that path. But you have to know it, you have to understand it, and it's something you need to be aware of. So that's certainly important. Obviously, help educating that new leader into their role and keeping them informed is critical to building that trust as well. But yes, ma'am.
I have someone in the chat that says something that helps them is to realize that the new person is feeling uncertain about how they will fit into the new existing group. And giving them a little empathy goes a long way.
Yep.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, we're focusing as administrators and managers and clerks, right?
But do we have
how this impacts
judges in the room?
Us, but
Judges in the room? Yes, sir. Thank you for letting us know. We didn't mean to talk just from our position, so we encourage you to let us know the presiding judge's perspective. So educating and informed, and I put, I'll ask you, you guys know the answer to this question. How does the work get done in your court? What decides how the work gets done? You guys know that saying, right? Understand your culture, understand that tells you how your work gets done. So you, in a position of leadership in your organization, know and understand the culture. Doesn't matter what's on the paper, how we do this, the culture determines how and when it gets done. So understanding the culture and helping that new leadership judge understand the structure as well as the politics. Mm-hmm. I would be careful with this one a little bit, but but the politics of the organization sometimes and understanding that can help you with that. Planning and implementing. And there is short-term planning and there's long-term planning. And I think you encourage that leadership judge to plan for the short term. How are we going to communicate to this organization? What are we going to say? And sometimes, no offense, new leadership judges walk in and they don't have a clear, thought out vision for where they want to go. That's okay. That's life. But you can be in a part of that, of helping them do that. And then, of course, our tool set on the administrator side is getting it implemented and helping them do that. To facilitate decision making. Okay, so two things here. I know you're on the bottom one already. You're saying, Ray, are you suggesting I walk in on day one and negotiate what I'm going to do? No, I'm not saying that. But we'll get to that in a minute. But you can facilitate the decision making when a new leadership judge comes in, because it does change. Sometimes before you were in charge of this and you were the one person that can make the decision, a new presiding judge comes in and says, wait a minute, I'm not comfortable with that. We're going to move that over here. But one of the worst things we can do is not get to the answer on this, because if we don't, it can cause conflict, a lot of conflict. And so we also often talk about decision charting on the big items. Budget, for instance, budget. Who's responsible for this, this, and this, this, and this on the budget? Who is that? Is that the presiding judge, or chief judge? Is that the administrator? And you can do that by various topics and really come to just getting understanding moving forward. Doesn't mean it's always going to be that way, does it? I had judges on day one. My horror story is I'm a judge back east. I come from the east. I'm in Arizona now. And so that court, what they did, the bench themselves elected the presiding judge. No problem with that. Problem is they elected him between Christmas and New Year's to start on day after. Somebody's shaking their head, probably know where I'm from. And I did not know this man at all. Did not know him. All I know is his assistant sent my assistant saying he wants to meet with me at 10 a.m. on the day after New Year's, and we'll talk about, and it's right down the hall. So I'm in my office, I'm ready to go. So the phone call comes in about something happened, not good. Take the phone call, and I gotta go. I walk down the hall, and it's just like 100, I get in there, it's 10:01. I sit down, and he looks up over his glasses, and he says, Mr. Billett, when I say 10 a.m., I mean 10 a.m. From now on, you will be here at 10 a.m. That's how that relationship started. Let me also tell you a great story. It was one of the best PJs I've ever had because we got by that. I understood what he wanted. I was on time, and he was a joy to work for. It took us a year or so, but that was my introduction. It took a year of me being on time. Most of my people know I'm not late for meetings. It makes me crazy. But that was my introduction that was my 5th or 6th presiding judge I worked for. But that's the way it started. He just looked up over he was a big Irishman, looked up over his glasses. Mr. Billett, it is 10:01.
Maybe we can ask, have some of you done that kind of decision charting? Just trying to show of hands a little bit. And
but I got
has that been helpful to you? My suggestion is to be really sensitive to side comments with our new judges or new leaders. And so you'll hear a judge, for example, say, why am I signing all this stuff? Why are you bringing this to me? Or why are we spending so much time on this? I had one judge, she turned out to be one of the best judges I've ever worked with, but we were getting ready for budget meeting. She calls and she goes, do I need to bring my glasses? I go, what? And she goes, are we going to get into all those spreadsheets? And I said, no, Judge, I've got that covered, but I need you here to kind of negotiate, on the priorities of the court. And there was some really serious security needs at that time, but you'll pick up on those kind of comments. And that's a great chance to then kind of refine if you don't want to sign every contract, Judge, we can set a threshold, a dollar limit there, and we'll be happy to handle those in court admin. And you sort of get the idea, but those are opportune times. And I say try to do that as early as you can. You can always make adjustments. Anybody want to share just what you did, how you handled that maybe?
Yes.
Yeah,
right
please.
Pass it down, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. So in the past, we've used RACI for those decision points. And I will say we didn't do it the last time. And we really see the difference because the relationship between the presiding and some of the directors aren't going as well as they could be had we sat down and done the RACI exercise with our presiding judges and our directors.
Thank you for sharing. And I should mention, in your materials today, you'll find 2 of the core modules, okay? One on leadership and then one on governance. We thought that kind of over, and so there you're going to see some just terrific resources that can be used for that kind of charting. Yep. And it also will talk about the negotiation part of it that Ray had mentioned. So yeah, these are all for the taking. And my sense would be you can look those over. You might even want to share that at a staff meeting if you're working with your team, and that would help them with their respective managers as well.
Yeah, and it's our opinion that facilitate decision-making isn't early on. It's earlier in the stage. Let's get down who are the decisions. Negotiating your role comes after that. And I don't mean you sit down with the presiding judge and let's negotiate here. No, but you see where things are going. As he just said, I've had presiding judges in Arizona that wanted to sign everything, didn't care. Then I've had ones who started, yes. 2 weeks later, 2 months later, what's going on here? I said, and it's kind of, and so let that happen. And you need patience for this kind of stuff. But that's where you get more into negotiating. Yeah. What do you want me to do more of as an administrator? What do I, as the administrator, need you as the presiding judge to do more of that I think could help us? What do we do? What should I be doing less of? What should you be doing less of? And that's what we're talking about when we use the term negotiating your role. And so keep that in mind. But I'm thinking, at least in my experience and career, that negotiation is a little bit later in the transition process. It's not day one. Yes, ma'am. Right. I know.
Hey, just 1 second, partner. Thank you. Go ahead,
I think
please.
Negotiating your role should be top priority, and it should be a class on that. It took me a year to get there in the position I'm in to where I felt comfortable enough to negotiate my role, which is okay because now I'm settled and now the judge knows I'm there and why I'm there and why he hired me. But that is something, especially with newer court administrators. I'm less than 10 years into this, but this was a new relationship. And so finding your footing is really important and just should be a huge, long class.
Well, that's why I put up here, it can be unnerving to you when you see that. Wait a minute, you're going to ask me? This person holds in his or her hands my employment here, and you're telling me to negotiate my role? Oops, things are falling apart. But again, it's not what I think is number one on the day one, but as you move forward and you have your relationship with the new presiding is more solid, it's a great place to really make strides in doing better leadership within your court. And so it's something to think about. Did you have a question? Oh, I thought you were. Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Can you give me an example?
Can you give me an example of defining a role or negotiating with a PJ on, what your expectations of them is going to be and how you make that happen?
Sure. So I made reference earlier to more or less. Here's one thing. So sometimes, and it depends on where your new presiding is, they may be real comfortable with communicating with the masses, and they may not be. And so let's take the latter stage. Ray, you're in charge of all communication. You can do that for a while. But don't you think the organization wants to hear from that person? Don't you think the organization, I'm not saying they don't want to hear from the court, the trial court leader or the leader of the court, an executive level, but don't they want to hear from the presiding judge as well? That is a point of negotiation. At some point, you go back and you sit down. Judge, I'd like you to think about doing more on this communication. Not every time, but more of it. And this is where I think it could be a benefit to you and the organization. Does that make sense when I talk about negotiating?
And Matt, a lot of times it's not, I think a lot of it's throughput. It's not the big, huge, exciting projects, but to me, it's the end basket that can really get you tripped up, okay? If you're not clear about, does the judge's JA look over this correspondence first, or does it go down to the jury office? And so I think trying to clarify that in a well-run court would just save you so much headache down the line. But it has to, I think Ray is right, you have to put it on the table, though. Otherwise, I think a new judge may think, gosh, they're doing stuff behind my back. They don't, I'm not looped in on this. I don't know what they're doing with that new project over there. So I think and we can really help on that. That's kind of our world, right? We love to do that kind of charting and be sort of analytical and whatnot. So we can put that together, but then we have to have that discussion with the judge because they may push back. They may say, no, I need to chair that work group, or I need to be at those meetings. And that's okay because they may give on some other things. And I think, Ray, you're right. It does sort of evolve too, right?
It evolves, yeah. So, all right. So before I move off of, I listed 6 things of keys to success for your relationship with the leadership judge or your leader. Anything else? Anything we missed? And as I said to you earlier, this is the first time we've done this. Marcus and I went through this, but we don't know everything. Oh, maybe he does, but I don't. No, I don't know everything. What else did Marcus and I miss? Because we're going to build this curriculum out more. And we want to make sure we're talking to the professionals and the people who have been through this experience. What did we miss in that relationship between you and the leader? Shelley.
I'm just curious because this has all got me thinking too. And I know how important the role is between the presiding judge or the leading judge and court administration, but if there's something that we could learn about maybe strengthening the bench relationships, because that still falls on court administration. We may not be directly involved, but we're impacted by it. And so I think it can sometimes cause division within the court when you have judges that are not agreeing with the presiding judge or judges that are disagreeing just with each other on the bench. So I think if there's some way that court administration can help maybe mediate the issues that might come up or something along those lines. Did I miss it, Ray?
No.
Oh, okay.
You did not.
Okay. Anyway, I think that would be helpful for us too, because I think that sometimes we can be in the middle and it's not a real comfortable situation.
Yeah. Well, I just want to make sure in the next, we were talking, as I said, I was trying to separate this. Maybe I shouldn't have. What I first talked about, those first 6 were about he and I. How do I help him transition into this job? And right, next 6 are going to be about how we can help that presiding judge transition into the new organization. Now, I didn't hit specifically what your issue. That's a great issue. It's also a dangerous issue. When you get involved in the politics of the bench. But that's a great point. But let me go to this. Oh, so we have more questions? Yes.
I'm going to preference this by saying that I'm the membership chair, and so I just want to make sure that we, for the NACM board, I want to make sure that we are inclusive of all of our members, and so I think it's important to relate this also to people who don't have maybe a large bench. If you're maybe in a municipality, you need to think about it from maybe your city manager stance or something of that nature. So I just wanted to throw that in there as well.
That's a great point. We're going to, and in here we talk about stakeholders, and I would, if politely put the city manager in that stakeholder position. Yes.
And I think it's such a good point because I think sometimes the dynamics in a small court are even trickier to me. A 2 or 3 judge court, that is, so I think that's really well taken.
And I agree. I started in a small court, and there are some things about that that are a heck of a lot different than the court I'm in now, which is almost 200 judges. So, yes, sir.
Well, I was just going to add that it always helps me to kind of frame the foundation of what we're trying to accomplish before even getting into the relationship negotiation part. Because we really want the same thing. We want good judgments. We want good service to the community. We want access. The question is going to come in, how do we provide that? And so if I can frame that as how do we best serve the public together, I don't take it personally necessarily whenever the judge wants to do something differently or the administrator wants to do something differently. I just have to define how my role is going to be defined in this relationship so that we can produce the ultimate outcome for the communities that we serve.
That's a better description of the alignment than I gave. Thank you. That's very good. Anything else before we move to the organizational side? So here are the things we came up with keys to success with the organization for the new leader. And someone over here brought it out early, a fault. There was no communication plan.
Right.
One of the first things you've got to work on with that new judge is a communication plan. And we talked about who's going to make those and what's in that communication plan. And remember, early on, you're not asking that presiding judge to list everything they want to do and where they're going to be in 3 years. That's not what you want to do. But you want them to be able to at least talk about their vision. What is my priority in this court? Is it to improve our services? Is it to strengthen our, whatever, I'm just coming up with our probation services. Is it to reduce the amount of time it takes to, whatever that vision is. There doesn't have to be a plan with that. But early on, you've got to at least help and move the new presiding judge along with, we got to come up and we got to talk to these folks because they're waiting. And the longer you wait, the longer and the more it will be disorganized, and there will be people, and we'll talk about that, the people that, I don't know where we're going here. I'm looking for another job. I'm getting out of here. I don't know what that person's going to do. So make sure you think about through that communication plan. I also just kind of joined that together. Vision and direction. I put whether jointly or individually, that's your local thing. We believe in our environment, when we talk about vision, the presiding judge and I speak together on where we're going. That's something but somehow that has to be part of the early transition of the new leader. We talked briefly about understanding and helping them integrate into the new job they've got, into the new culture they have, and understanding all about that culture in the organization itself. Build relationships. One of the more difficult things sometimes for new presiding judges to build those relationships. Most of them I've been line, and I use line judges. I mean, they've been in the courtroom. They do their work every day. They get up and they go home. Now they're in this environment where it's not about what's in the courtroom. It's about this organization and having them understand that they need to build relationships outside of just their judge colleagues. As I said, you can do that through helping them be able to build those relationships, meetings, briefings, communications, any way in which they can facilitate an open communication. How many of you have seen, heard, felt in your organization resistance? Oh, this new person's coming in. I know he or she did blah, blah, blah before. We're in trouble, right? We're in trouble. Anybody? One? Not had that? Where someone fears the new presiding coming in, what this person may do? Please. Okay, go on.
My situation was unique in the sense that I had all the other administrators and directors decide that they were going to use me as the guinea pig and say that any time that there was bad news that they had to give to the presiding judge or president judge, as we call them in my state, that I was to be the spokesperson. But anytime they had good news to deliver, oh, sure, I'll go talk to that judge.
Oh, wow.
But it was funny because it was a running joke that the judge and I had, and yes, he intimidated people right off the bat, but since I had worked with him for several years, he did on me, and he kind of knew it. So we kind of had a little smirk with one another. And we always knew that when I came to him with certain news, he said, "Oh, let me guess. If you're coming to speak for X person, it must be bad news." I said, "Yes."
And Rick, could you just stay with that second? And any lessons learned from that, or just anything that, in retrospect, you can share with the team? It sounds like a dicey situation, but how did you?
Well, I think I was fortunate that I had a good relationship with this judge. I mean, it was a little tenuous at the outset because I had just become the court administrator, and this gentleman just became the president judge or presiding judge. So we were both new in many respects, even though we were both in court administration or on the bench for some time. So we at least had a relationship. But I do think it does tell you that you do need to build your relationships with others, and to also be wary of those relationships with others too, because they do change from time to time.
Very political. How many of you have had employees come to you and when they know this new transition, this new leader is coming in, and express some concern and doubt, and what's going to happen here? No one? Please, Paul. He's got Paul.
I was the state court administrator for one of the 7 departments of the trial court of Massachusetts for about 7 years when the Chief Justice announced his retirement. The appointment of a new Chief Justice came down to 2 different candidates. And to her credit, one of the judges came to me and said, "Paul, when I get appointed, you're gone, because I intend to bring about a bunch of changes." On the other hand, the other one came to me and said, "Paul, if I get appointed, you've got to stay because I don't know which end is up." You can all imagine who I supported.
No, I know you. I'm not sure who you know.
Who I worked to make sure was ultimately appointed as chief, and I stayed on for another 7 years.
Thanks. Anyone else have a little story they want to share with the group about this? Well, we all in this room all have a responsibility in this area, because if you hear about it, if you know about it, you can't hide it. You have to have that tough conversation. How many of you have gone through those crucial conversation courses? Come on, Maricopa people, you all did it.
Where's Keith?
You got to have a crucial conversation, because you can't hide those things from a new leader, that there are issues. Doesn't mean you get down to the nitty-gritty details, but it does mean that you need to convey and let them know there are some issues out here, and come with an idea of how to address those. And that's what we mean by managing resistance and conflict with a transition. And then finally, I know, there goes Ray off on strategic planning again. I'm a huge strategic planning believer. I love it. And I didn't at first. I hated it, actually. I hated it. But I learned early on, it's not the process of getting to the plan that counts. It's the implementation. And I strongly believe one of the keys to successful long-term transition with that new presiding judge is to have a strategic plan, a roadmap of where we're going, why we're going there, and how we're going to get there. And I think it really does serve a great purpose for not only your transition and leadership and work with that presiding judge, but for the organization as a whole. Now, I'll pause there, and I know many of my team is going to argue with me on that.
Ray, I think it does go to Shelley's question, though. How do you engage the bench? How do you build that bridge? And if there's a plan that the whole court signed off on, I think you're in a lot better position than these are just a bunch of pet projects,
right?
In the personage of, let's say, some judge who's just excited about drug courts, but not. So I think that kind of a document. I know your Coconino County, I know, does a big, very large scale planning, including the community and others, and so I think that's really great foundational work.
And I know you'll touch later on pet projects, but they can be a killer. If you just have little pet projects that PJ and you are doing with others in the organization and not including the whole organization, they can be real problems for morale within the organization. So those are the 6 organizational keys to leadership that Marcus and I came up with. Anybody want to add anything? What did we miss? In your experience, what's not up there that should be there? We're not that good. Come on, there's got to be something.
Ken's got one. Go ahead, Ken.
Okay, please. Give it to her next.
I'm not sure exactly whether this fits into this stage of your presentation or another, but this gets to structural changes that you can do so that you're not talking about what you're doing in the individual transition, but so that you help all transitions.
Okay.
That is, we've been talking about 2-year terms for presiding judges, which you barely know what you're doing and you're already rotating off.
Yeah. Correct.
And I think it came out of a NAPCO presentation, I can't remember, where they recommended a minimum of 4 years.
Yes, we did.
And maybe a year before the current rotates off, you have the secondary person, the person who's going to succeed, come in and shadow and learn a little bit about the process, because that's got to make things easier. And I hope I'm not stealing your thunder.
No, Kent, please go.
For later on.
No, go.
But that's definitely got to help the administrator and the incoming presiding or chief judge, whatever you call it, to know what's going on long before they have the actual authority issue. And they can deal with some of these issues as, you'll do this and I would rather do this, and change up before you actually have the tensions about the negotiation, that they'll know in advance about what they're getting into. So,
Ken, great point. Carla?
Yeah, I think that with the strategic planning, that you have to have consensus building. I work with a court right now that merged a municipal court and a traffic court that were in the same building, but neither court judges nor employees would speak to one another. And they were told not to cross the line and speak to the other court. So the legislature passed legislation to merge the courts, and the process of doing that took over 2 years just to get the judges to be able to talk with one another and realize they had to build a strategic plan to get to the point that they could merge. They were getting a lot of pressure from their mayor in order to merge it and also to reduce judgeships. Within that consensus building, they ended up voluntarily reducing a judgeship, which I don't think has been done anywhere.
That doesn't happen very often.
And that was a lot of negotiation because the mayor wanted to reduce 4 judgeships in the legislature. So finally they realized the writing was on the wall. They didn't have the work. Now they're working together, and they try to build a consensus when they come to stalemates with different issues, and it works. Do you think that strategic planning is?
Yeah, Marcus and I could do a whole nother course just on that topic. And I think we do. I don't know. But I'm an advocate of it. I know in judges' ears a lot of times, and respectfully, it what? I don't want to go through that process. But it builds successes. They're not always great, but it does give the organization a vision forward. And I think that's a great idea. Thank you. Anyone else want to share anything on these keys from an organizational standpoint? Marcus, I went a little too long, but go ahead. I'm going to get out of your way.
You know, we were going to ask you about some practical tips you've been thinking about, but I think I'll just move ahead and just share a little more content if I can. We'll loop right back to this. And I mentioned to you, I didn't find a lot on transition in the court management literature. So I did go back out to the private sector, and some of these notes here are from Deloitte Touche and another consulting company, McKinsey. And the catch for us is a lot of this is in banking and finance, but I think the ideas still may resonate with you. Now, this actually is a court quote. Anybody know where this came from? Come on, I need some of the old timers to jump in. Okay, purposes of courts. You all know about that, right? Professor Ernie Friesen. Well, Ernie did a lot of work at our court over the years. He was the only consultant I ever knew that could actually tell off the bench and they would actually thank him, okay? The guy was amazing, okay? And, but he always, he would pick up on sort of the nuances. And typically, and of course, there can be a big pendulum swing, okay? And I think you touched on this too, Ray, where if this justice, let's say, had a big emphasis on this or that, okay, there's sort of the autoimmune system kicks in, right? And that next judge may likely want to take the court in a different direction. Ernie was very aware of that when we did our criminal case management project. He could just sort of sense that there's going to be a change in leadership, there's going to be a change in priorities. And so he came up with this line here, and I wanted to make sure it was his. I actually Googled, has anybody else said this? Okay, but it's so true to stay in with the outs, because the outs will someday be in. And you can just sort of sense it. So I think the point here is to try to look ahead. Who's in succession? Ken, you touched on it formally, but there may be a whole nother group down the hall of judges or justices, okay, that may come into leadership, and you need to be really mindful of that, to be respectful and kind of what Shelley said, to keep your connections with those folks. But that may be your next presiding judge. So that was a wake-up call for me, because I always thought Maricopa Superior was just organized and look at a Swiss watch, and it's just kind of, we know who's in line the next several years, but not necessarily so. And his instinct was so good there. So that one has always stayed with me for my career. So from the consulting world, it's suggested you try to identify those leaders, right? And I think we've talked about that a little bit. Try to be really clear about that. And then I would suggest to include those folks, any potential leaders, in all of your work groups, your strategic plan. If you do a site visit to another court, that's a great team building thing, right? We used to always go to Orange County or LA. Bring along 2 or 3 of those judges in the group so they can start to catch the fever, right? They can kind of understand why this is an exciting direction for the court, whether it's case management, new buildings, new computer technology and whatnot. And that will really serve you well, I think. And we're suggesting if you do have a plan, that can really help you kind of set out the priorities to know what's really important, what's really time sensitive, where do we want to make our next big push when it comes to capital funding, those kind of initiatives. It's so much easier, what did Ray say, if you have that plan, and I think you also want to refresh that plan so you can use that. And that's kind of what they're doing in the private sector. You have a business plan, you share that with the shareholders, right, and the board of directors, and then your chairman of the board, and ultimately then the CEO. It will execute on that. But without that, you don't have that alignment, right? And you can just really be spinning your wheels. And in private sector, they would say that goes right to the bottom line, right? We are losing market share because we're out of alignment here. So I think those are terrific. And then we have a note too about professional development, trying to bring the whole staff along, not just the executive office. And I think that can be helpful. Now, do you folks do stuff like this? Do you have any briefing books for new judges, new presiding judges? So Rick, does anybody else? I think this is really important, and this is not hard. It's just you need to take the time, and you need to do it ahead of time, right? And I'm kind of old school. I think it'd be a nice big white notebook, okay, with about 20 tabs, and it's kind of your organization charts, maybe your contact list, the strategic plan for sure, and maybe some recent memos on some of the big directions. But if you put that together, take that time and energy and sit down with that new judge and sit together right across the table and go through that, I think you'll see it just pays back in dividends. And nothing made me happier than when a judge will go back. I'll see that notebook kind of across their desk and say, oh, they're using our briefing book, okay? Because, Ray is right. When they first come in, they don't have those contacts, let's say at the county board or the city manager's office. So time well spent. And Rick, if you've done something with that, do you want to share anything with the group? Maybe it could. Oh, there's another person back there. I'm coming back to you. Please, just share what you've done along those lines.
So actually, I was just going to say that I did a soft landing. We went to lunch and got to know each other and build that relationship of trust before we even sat down and did the deep dive into everything that we're doing in our court. We're not a large court. We have 5 judges, 1 referee, but it needed to happen. And that lunch was crucial in just getting to know one another and have a feel of what we were about and what our core values were about and what each of us were bringing to the table.
Did you set that, or did the judge ask, or how did you go?
I did, yeah. Okay, I set it up.
And see, that's what I did not do when I was back on. We fretted for 2 or 3 months. Terrific. I think that's terrific. And there was no penalty, right? It turned out to be really worth it.
It was great, yeah. He's still presiding judge.
Well, that's even better.
I'm still an administrator.
No, thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing. Now, yeah, so sometimes we have to just get out of our comfort zone a little bit. I'm sure that was not easy, or you probably had to think about that a minute. Was there another hand back here? Yeah, please, jump in.
Hi, I'm from Miami. I was just going to say we do something similar, and I'm old school, all about the books, but actually, I love the Gen Zs and the diversity of my staff. And when we have new judges onboarding, and I run a unified family court, so there's a lot of cross-training. And we have what we call a judicial welcome wagon. So, and we upload everything on SharePoint. So we have all sorts of judicial training materials and videos, and we keep building this catalog on, through the times, things that we developed a while ago, new legislation. And it's not what we found really, we added to it. not just the judges, but the judicial assistants.
That's terrific.
So many guides for them, and for the bailiffs too. We have bailiffs, and now they're changing in Florida, in Miami. But in any event, we do a one-on-one type of a cross-training and mentoring, but having those materials at their fingertips. And for those that are less tech savvy, we will provide written materials, and, we have the clicks, the easy links and everything. But that's something that's been super helpful for us. And of course, it's about the engagement. Everything is the engagement, and like you were saying, making that connection, and being fearless. Because at the end of the day, when you're developing a relationship, and it gets to the point they're calling from the bench or wherever their office, and they're screaming, on the other end and holding the phone. Okay, are you done? When you're able to get to that point and then have a rational conversation, that's what it's all about. So to be able to, your reputation is all you have. And if you have that, it will speak for itself, and you earn that respect. But that's what I felt.
Yeah, great suggestions. And I love that idea of including the judge's immediate staff, because this is going to be new to these folks as well, right? The whole schedule's different. Maybe the judge no longer has the full calendar and whatnot. So that's terrific. And appreciate your sharing that. Mention to you the pet projects, because that's where you can run into contention. The one I wanted to share with you real quickly was a judge terrific judge, but he had this idea of having a high profile, large, high security jury trial room in the jail. Okay, so can conduct trials in very serious criminal cases. And we had a bunch of other courtrooms and jails for the initial appearances and so on. And new judge, and by the way, this was all in the architectural planning and whatnot. New judge comes in, presiding judge, and he'd been a federal public defender. And what do you think he thought about that? Okay, I'm not going to hold any trials in the jail. Okay, and the tension was beyond. And that's one of those that was not in the strategic plan, right? And ultimately, we never built that court. Mark, I'd love to talk with you. Mark had worked in this area as well, but it's interesting where that can really cause a huge amount of upset. And so you want to, if you stay with your strategic agenda, I think you'd be more likely to vet those kind of projects. And because the new judge found a lot of support from other judges who had been kind of wondering about this, or what are we doing over there, but never really raised the issue. Let's see, same for special projects and so on. And I'm going to just kind of buzz through this. I love these suggestions from Deloitte. I don't know if you folks have worked with Deloitte Consulting, but they're kind of indicating here that you really need to be careful with sort of the introductions when a new judge does come on board. And that's what Ray touched on this. You can actually accompany the judge to maybe make personal visits, let's say to the county board chairman, to the mayor's office, to some of the other offices and whatnot, and kind of create those first impressions. I love this idea that you want to be really authentic in those communications. There's some folks you can just make a phone call. And if you read through all this, they're saying you really tried not to make introductions by email, right? That personal touch is so much better. I think we know that, right? But when you get so busy, sometimes you maybe wait 2 or 3 months to make these critical introductions. And that third bullet, I love that too, to be respectful of the past work that's been done, right? All the decisions that were made by that past administration, there has to be context for those, right? And so I think good leadership says we honor all that. We're going to build on the work that's been done, but we're not going to run down that judge or the administrator. And I think that kind of does sort of help to set that right tone. And then this whole notion about meetings and whatnot. So with that, maybe you can go back here if it's okay. And Ray, I wasn't sure if there's anything you want to add too.
No, our last, you're going backwards.
I'm going backwards.
Oh.
I'm going to see if I can find. Where am I?
I don't
here?
go back.
I'm going to ask
I'm
you.
like George Patton.
I
don't go backwards.
I'm doing a roundup with you folks to see if there's anything else you want to share with the group, because there's so much.
Because we know we're prompt. It's 3:10.
That's right.
So we got through that.
So we can hear 5 more tips, okay?
Questions you have for us?
Yeah.
What didn't we hit on that you were hoping when you walked in the door? These guys better talk about this.
Yeah.
And I knew Keith would tell me.
Oh, no, I have a question for you. Have you ever run into a situation where new leadership, new presiding judge comes in and has maybe their own ideas, not taking the best practices that you talked about, where understanding kind of some of that institutional history that's occurred, and rather has come in with their own ideas and maybe wanting to bring in their own team even?
I have personally not had it that far, that deep. I mean, I've had, and I referred to, and I don't want to get into, but I've had problems, serious problems with one in my career, and really, and honestly, in this room, rethought whether I was staying in that job because it wasn't going where I felt. It was a team approach to what we were doing. It was this and you stay over here, I stay over here, and I unfortunately in my life, in my work, I can't do that. It just, but I haven't had it to that extent. I'll defer to Marcus if he's ever had that, someone bring their own team with them.
I think the really savvy administrators are able to see that and then kind of do the calculus and decide, kind of what Ray said, is this a place I want to stay? I mean, you can almost see that if that's 3 more judges, okay, that's 6 years of my life, of my career. Yeah. And so I think it's the exception for well-managed courts, but when it does come up, I think it does. I think, Ray, you're right. It's going to be some really tough decisions.
It's a difficult thing. I'm assuming many of you in this room, or some of you in this room, have felt that. Yeah. Oh my, I've got this person in here, and we're just not. Yeah. I mean, we're like this, and it happens. And as I told you my first story, that's the way we started out with one of them, but it ended very well. Yes, ma'am.
So I just want to mention, this was leveraging this change is important. I heard a lot of conversations about leveraging change when you're talking about presiding judges. But as we all know, the people that are running the court are our staff, the ones that keep it flowing and keep it moving. And I'm in a very small court, 1.5 judges, not saying that that judge is short, but he is 1.5 judges. Oh my. And what I'm finding is I came in just after the new judge came in. He had, by the time I got there, already lost all the staff but 2 in this small court. That's a big change. And so what was affected was the staff in the court. So running a court with just a couple of staff, I have only one person left that's been there for 22 years. And I had to convince her to stay. Give me 6 months. Let me work on building relationships. Let me work on improving where we're at. I now have 13 staff. We're running smoothly. We're a very strong team. But what I didn't hear a lot of talk about was the staff that are running the courts. That's the only piece that I saw missing. That's a component we need to add.
By the way, that's capitalizing on an opportunity, not dwelling on a problem. That's what you just did. And that's a good transition.
That's terrific right now.
And I just want to say, I'm not with Maricopa County. I'm right outside of it in Pima County. Maricopa is its own state, so I'm in Arizona.
Actually,
she's in a very scenic part of the valley, beautiful area.
Yes, ma'am.
I think I really want to piggyback on what she was saying, and that was going to be my thing, is finding that balance, because you're the court administrator more than likely, so then you've got to balance the relationship with the staff. You've got to balance now your relationship with the new leader. So finding that balance, I think, is important to add to that list.
Thank you. Great points, both. Thank you. Others, suggestions for us or questions? Keith,
Ray, I just have one point as a kind of opposite of what I was talking about before. So I've counted, I've been through 18 presiding judges.
Oh my.
And on that note, I think you just need to help them understand your value. And
you do
help them understand.
And if that didn't come through, my apologies. That's what I talked about that first slide about. You have things in your toolkit, and one of them is your value. Now you can't push it on them, because if you try to do that, they're going to go, "Oh boy, this person wants to take over." But that's a great point. You have value. You have those tools that they can leverage, if you will, to be a better presiding judge, a better leader in your court. It's a great point. Yes.
Oh, okay. I hope you all can hear me. So I just wanted to piggyback off of some comments that she made in galvanizing your own abilities to support a new presiding judge or administrator. I've been in a court where the judge thought that they were administrator. And so we know that
we all have.
Yes, judges may not be good administrators or maybe good litigators, or being judges. So I just that made me think about what you said about some comments you made during one of our NACM sessions, where you would be a master delegator, where you would delegate some tasks and you can use your abilities then to maybe even do some coaching for the judge and, you know, kind of bring them up in their own role. And so I thought that was great. And maybe that's your succession planning as well, where you can kind of develop your staff that you have and bring out those qualities, because they may be looking to you and what they want to do here in the future. And then you may be able to use that opportunity to maybe focus your attention somewhere else.
It's a joke. In Maricopa County, I don't have letters after my name like PhD. I have MD, Master Delegator.
Ray, I'm being told that our time is up. I want to remind everybody about no, not at all. I want to remind everybody about the Champions program to maybe participate, learn more about that. Dawn is here with us. And we want to thank you. You folks have been really attentive. We were hoping for a little discussion, and you really came through, which I think makes it all the better. And so let's continue the discussion here. And Ray, was there anything else you want to mention?
No, just to thank you very much for your attention and listening and your questions. Great questions and helping us. Thank you. Thank you.
You guys. Thank you.